Hello there. Welcome to Slim and Semm. Slim and Semm. Sorry, even though I'm getting used to that. Uh, me, your boy, Mike. Go by Dark Slim. Have for a long time. My writing name and my online streaming name. Yeah. So today's the NBA draft, and I was talking in the group chat with the boys, and I just felt like talking a little basketball today. I got 82 and 0 back in the background. Again, might do a little bit of that. Also have an article. It's not like a new article. It's really from last year, but it felt relevant to a lot of things that we were talking about in the group chat. Um, just talking about different players, and this just got me thinking because I feel like when it comes to us talking about NBA players, a lot of discussions go towards this concept of skill and what skills mean. And there are certain players that, in a lot of conversations and circles of fans, they're always identified as like highly skilled players. And we're going to talk about some of them in a second. But, with players like Giannis getting traded, um, basically early this morning, like last night, and Jalen Brown, you know, the Celtics possibly thinking of moving him and him being a piece that they were putting out there, and now they're stuck with him because the deal went through, fell through with Milwaukee because Giannis ended up going to Miami. The question of like how skilled players are evaluated, assessed, and how where we put them in terms of like in history, or how we rate players against one another based on their skills, but then how do skills translate to success? How do skills translate to results? How sometimes they don't. Um, yeah, we were like talking about all that type of shit, and that was just in my head. So, you got the draft tonight. I haven't really been paying too much attention to the college basketball uh, draft class, but apparently it's a really strong draft class. I think a lot of people have AJ as their number one pick. He interviews very well. He's a very confident young man, and if you've seen any highlights of his, you might understand why. Very very talented, physically gifted player that seems to already have his NBA body, even though he doesn't. But it's kind of scary to think if he takes care of himself, what he could be doing on a basketball court if he's already doing what he's doing now. Two strides from the 3 point line to the bucket to the rim. He's a very very impressive young basketball talent. But we were talking like one of the questions that came up, and I think it was just like tongue in cheek, just to like was like who's a better player in their prime, Paul George or OG Anunoby? And one of my nephews responded to that question from their cousin. They responded with OG got 2 chips. So, and the person that posited the question was like, yeah, but he didn't even play in one of them, which is true. OG did not really play for Toronto. He had an appendectomy and wasn't part of that run in the playoffs like he would want it to be. They still won the championship, but OG wasn't as much of a part of the team as he, you know, was hoping because of the injuries. And with the Knicks this year, he was definitely a huge part of the playoff run that they went on. But he did miss a part of it with hamstring issues. But in the finals, he was like, he was this close. He was this close to being the finals MVP. He was playing that well. So Brunson had those back to back amazing games. So, the question was who's better? Paul George in his prime or OG Anunoby in his prime? And, you look at Paul George's numbers in the regular season and they dwarf OG Anunoby's numbers. They're way better numbers. Paul George has, finished in the top 5 of MVP voting in one season. I think he was top 7 in another. Paul George has finished in the top 5 in Defensive Player of the Year voting I don't think OG has. Paul George has made numerous all defensive teams. I don't think OG Anunoby has. But if you just go by playoff performance, you know, OG's peak in the playoffs was pretty much this year. Paul George's peak in the playoffs was probably back in his Indiana days. And, Paul George ran into the Heat, Miami, LeBron, Wade, and Bosh and them. Not an easy task. Obviously fell short. OG, you know, played a future superstar in Wemby, played a future, possible perennial finals appearance type of team with the Spurs, depending on if they keep themselves together. And, he played up. OG played way up. And who would you rather have? This question was who would you rather have? Me personally, in their primes, I acknowledge that Paul George has been better. Both players have had numerous injuries in their careers. So that's maybe a wash. But like seeing Anunoby perform the way he did on the biggest stage, I tend to lean, if I need to win a series, I think it's proven I need to take a player like OG and not Paul George. If I'm starting a team and then they're in their prime, maybe I take a Paul George. Such a great all around player. But then again, playoff performances, how much do they matter, right? So then the idea came up about like skills. And you think about players like Jalen Brunson, highly skilled player. You would have to be highly skilled to do what he does on the court and be, 6 foot if he's tippy toeing. You know what I'm saying? Like he's not a big guy in terms of his height, in terms of he's not Tayshaun Prince with the wingspan. You know what I mean? But he's strong and he has great footwork, great touch around the rim, can finish with either hand. He's a lefty, so that does cause some matchup issues. People not used to guarding people who are dominantly left-handed, predominantly left-handed. He's a great shooter, and he's the type of player that has proven year after year after year that he plays up in the clutch. One of the best fourth quarter clutch scorers the NBA has seen, especially in the postseason. And they won a championship with him as the best player. So you think about a player like Jalen Brunson, and then I think about players like Kyrie Irving. I love Kyrie Irving. I love Kyrie Irving as a basketball player. I mean, if you had to pay to watch somebody play the game of basketball, you want to pay to see Kyrie Irving because you're going to see something you probably never seen before. He's an absolute wizard with the basketball. He's an excellent scorer, one of the best, if not the best, finishers at the rim for a small guard that I've ever seen. He's a great shooter. He's had 50, 40, 90 seasons. For people that may not know what that is, but you're watching this for some reason, that means he, for a season, shot 50% from the field for his shots, 40% from 3 point range, and 90% from the line. That's a feat that is not that prevalent. It doesn't happen often. There's not that many players in the NBA who have been able to do that, let alone multiple times. Larry Bird did it. Durant has done it. Kyrie's done it. Not that many players have done it. But with that said, Kyrie on the big stage played well when he was with the Cavs in the playoffs, hit big shots, made a lot of clutch plays, and helped Cleveland to win a championship. Kyrie Irving is an NBA champion, and he was a significant part of that. Absolutely. But after that success, Kyrie has had opportunities to play on teams, without LeBron James and without the supporting cast that he had on the Cavs, and had different teammates, different supporting casts. The Celtics when they were younger, the current Celtics when they were younger with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. He was on the Brooklyn Nets with Kevin Durant and James Harden. I know there were a lot of injuries that took place. I know there was the whole COVID vaccine situation as well that hindered things. But at the end of the day, Kyrie Irving has not had as much success as he initially had in Cleveland when it comes to playoff success, victories, leading a team. He was in Dallas with Luca. Luca, was the lead dog on that sled. Pulling that sled. But Kyrie was a significant contributor to the success of the Dallas Mavericks. They fell short. I know he had injuries as well there, but injuries, availability, that's part of the game. That's part of what you should take into account when you're taking a look at a player's career, when you're evaluating their career and not ranking them for the sake of argument, but when you're thinking about, well, if I'm making a team, if I'm rolling the spinning dice here, and I get both of these players, who am I taking? Even though this is just based on numbers. But speaking of Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum, look at that. They came up on the 82 and 0. You see them in the background. But so you take a player like Brunson, you take a player like Kyrie, and I think most people would agree. I think that whether right or wrong, I think the majority of people would agree. Hey, Kyrie is a more skilled player. I think that they would say that. I don't know if I would argue with them if they chose Kyrie over a player like Jalen Brunson in terms of skill. When we talk about skill, what are we talking about? If we want to just use the regular internet definition of it, skill is the learned ability to perform an action or task well with determined results. In other words, you take the actions or the task that you're performing, you do it well to the point where you get determined results. You get the results in terms of when we talk about sports is winning. I think it translates most to winning. All right, we got Ruff that just joined the Discord in case you're hearing stuff. What's up, Fino? Hey, when you talk about skills, you're talking about how the actions of an individual impact the predetermined outcomes. So shooting, the basic basketball skills, dribbling, passing, shooting, scoring, just instincts, court vision, all that type of stuff goes into talent. But how does that translate into results? And I think the most important result when you're talking about basketball, obviously, is winning. So when you take a player like Jalen Brunson, you take a player like Kyrie, like I said, I won't argue with you if you were to say Kyrie is clearly the more talented, skilled player. But if you want to argue with me when it comes to how those skills translate to successes, I mean, then wouldn't Jalen Brunson be the preferred choice there? This is where my brain goes. I think of things like this. Let me bring up that list that I mentioned earlier. Let me just put that on the screen real quick. Whoop, that's me taking me off the screen. Okay, there, right there. This is an old list. This is a list that AI put together. Our good friend artificial intelligence, naming the 10 most skilled players of all time, not including LeBron James. Why LeBron James was excluded from the list, I don't know, but I wouldn't put him on the list anyway. That's fine. Another story for another day. And on a list like this, it has Dirk at 10, Kobe at number 1. Just to give you an idea. Kobe at number 1, Dirk at 10. A player that's not on this list, which boggles my mind, a player that's not on this list, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's the second all-time leading scorer, by the way, who has a basketball resume that is, I would say, second to none, because I don't think he lost a game in high school. A game in high school. I think he won 3 or 4, I don't even know, NCAA championships, and was the best player on that team each time in UCLA. Then he came to the NBA, immediately had an impact. Has possibly the most dominant shot in the history of the game. Actually, I don't even think you can argue. That sky hook was the most effective shot in the history of the NBA. It led him to the second highest scoring total in the history of the game. It's a shot that everybody knew was coming and no one could ever stop. You talk about skill. You talk about a predetermined outcome, talent. That was literally an unstoppable shot. Steph Curry is probably the greatest shooter of all time. You can block his shot. Difficult, but you can. Couldn't block Kareem's shot, and you knew it was coming. Skill. Skill and how that results into wins. I think that we lose that. Kobe Bryant they put as the most skilled player on this AI generated list, and AI is probably getting his opinion on Reddit blogs, Reddit posts, and all this type of stuff. People's opinion, public opinion. Everybody got an opinion. Like we all got assholes, but Kobe Bryant, number one player. I love Kobe. He is one of the most skilled players ever, and he also won 5 championships. Won 5 championships. So I'm not being hypocritical when I say, how those skills need to translate to predetermined outcomes, and the most important predetermined outcomes should be to win. Fino's a Jets fan, so he knows better than anybody. The famous Herman Edwards quote: "You play to win the game." Hello? You play to win the game. How you play? The demonstration, the exhibition of skills? Yeah, that's what we pay the tickets for, probably, but at the end of the day, you play to win. You play to win a championship. You play to be the best. And the best way to demonstrate that you are the best is to win. Now you go down valiantly. You have a situation where like LeBron, game one of those finals when he scored like 51 points, had 8 rebounds, 8 assists, but they lose in overtime to the Golden State Warriors. The stacked Golden State Warriors team. They had a chance to steal game one and squandered it. I'm not gonna put it all on J.R. Smith, but they squandered that opportunity. Hell of an effort. Came up short. You lose. People want to say LeBron is one of the most skilled players of all time. I'm not gonna argue that he isn't. But when you see a player like Steph Curry, who won just as many championships during his run, who's the more skilled player? I don't know. You can fill up the stat sheet, but if you don't win, what's the point? Kevin Durant number 4 on this list. Kevin Durant number 4 on this list. Kevin Durant's only championship success, only playoff successes came as a part of the Warriors. Everybody's familiar with the controversy of him going to the Warriors in the first place after the Warriors were the one that came back and beat his team coming from 3-1 down. The OKC Thunder back in the day. Kevin Durant goes to the enemy team, if you're an OKC fan, goes to the enemy team, the team that took you out, wins 2 championships. Almost wins a third. Almost won a third. Got hurt. Kevin Durant, talking about a 50-40-90 season, like I mentioned before, he's one of those players that's done that multiple times. Kevin Durant, for a man his size, dribbles the basketball, can move around the court in ways that very few players in history can. Great jump shot, great scorer. Not the best defender. Because you would think, can you imagine if Kevin Durant had like Tayshaun Prince? I'm bringing it up again. If he had his type of defense, similar builds, they got similar builds. Defense is more effort than anything else. That's what all the coaches say. I digress. Kevin Durant recognized as one of the most talented players in history, but even Kevin Durant and Kyrie and James Harden, when they combined forces in Brooklyn, couldn't get it to work. Kevin Durant on the Suns couldn't get it to work. On Houston now, he's more known for his burner account comments than he is for any meaningful results on the Rockets. Tenuous situation there with your teammates when you're talking shit about them online and how that translates to the court. Chemistry, I love Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is a student of the game, a hooper's hooper. Super skilled. But has he ever led a team that wasn't stacked like the Warriors to even similar success? The answer is no. Went to the finals with that OKC team early on when they were babies. Him, Westbrook, and Harden. Harden's another one. Would you take a James Harden over another, let's say, Jason Tatum, NBA champion Jason Tatum. Would you take a James Harden over a Jason Tatum? I know a lot of people would say, hell yes, they would. James Harden is an MVP. James Harden is a scoring champion. James Harden is one of the toughest one-on-one uh, guards that has ever been in the league. James Harden, a great shooter, a tremendous playmaker, talent, skill, there. Is he an NBA champion? No. Jason Tatum, much younger than James Harden, doesn't have the numbers of James Harden, but he's an NBA champion. Who would you rather take? These are tough questions. Jaylen Brown, would you take him over James Harden? I know a lot of people would say, hell no. Jaylen Brown's a finals MVP and a champion. James Harden has led his teams into playoff runs. James Harden has led his teams in a Western Conference that during his time was pretty damn stacked. You could say they still are. Jaylen Brown this year, once Jason Tatum went down, I think a lot of people had the Celtics either in a play-in or the lottery team. Jaylen Brown kept that team afloat. Jaylen Brown kept that team in contention. He gets a lot of props from me. Would I take him over James Harden if I needed to make a playoff run? I don't know. See, this is what I'm talking about when it comes to skills and how that translates into desired outcomes, wins. It's really tricky. Let's scroll more on this list. You got Akeem Olajuwon at number 5. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's the only center on this AI generated list. Akeem Olajuwon. They got him at number 5. Akeem Olajuwon, one of the greatest. You can make the argument, the greatest two-way players in the history of the NBA. Akeem Olajuwon during an era of some of the greatest centers in the history of the NBA to play during the same time. Hakeem won the most chips out of them, besides Shaq. But he beat Shaq early on. Won back to back, won MVPs, all time leader in block shots. When it comes to footwork, I mean, you have players even today who go and try to spend time with Hakeem in a gym to learn something from the inventor of the dream shake. Hakeem Olajuwon, I don't know if anybody in their right or sane mind would ever doubt that he was a skilled ball player. That he was a skilled player for his size. Tremendous hands, tremendous touch, great leader. You ask Vernon Maxwell, he used to smack the shit out of his teammates, but he never got a Last Dance documentary for us to judge him. Hakeem Olajuwon, his talent resulted in 2 wins. Now, 2 wins when Jordan's Bulls were not at full strength, but still back-to-back wins. Rudy Tomjanovich, the late great coach, his shaky, trembling voice when describing or when talking to his team, trying to motivate them. Never underestimate the heart of a champion. Like he had winners around him, all thanks to Hakeem. Skills translating into desired outcomes, wins. There are other great bigs who don't have 2 championships. Other great bigs who don't have the accolades of Hakeem Olajuwon. But we talk about their skills, their tremendous skills. Would you take Jokic over Hakeem? These are the type of things I'm talking about. Jokic, a multi-time MVP. You can make the argument that man should have 5 or 6 straight MVPs now. When it comes to analytics and stats, offensively, we have never seen a player like Nikola Jokic. He is a champion. And I'm not going to be one of those people to bring up that it might have been one of the easiest championship runs of all time. I'm not going to do that. I won't. But would you take Nikola Jokic over Hakeem Olajuwon? I don't know. These are the question: how important is skill to you? How much does skill impact winning? How important is skill when it comes to winning? It's obviously necessary. You're not going to win an NBA championship if you don't have talent. You're not even going to be in the NBA if you don't have talent. But how many times have we seen more skilled players not have as much success as less skilled players? Now, you might say, well, Nikola Jokic never played on a team like Hakeem had with the Rockets. That may be true. I was just thinking big for big. That may be true. Wemby just made his first finals. Wembenyama already won a unanimous Defensive Player of the Year, and if he stays healthy, I mean, the man might win many more. He might break the Kemba Mutombo's record for most Defensive Players of the Year. He might do it. That's a real solid shot. Speaking of a solid shot, Hakeem wasn't pulling up for three like this man. Hakeem wasn't doing tween like this man. He was doing different things, also impressive things. And Wemby is one of those players who has studied under Hakeem, spent time with Hakeem. Even though it's early on, would you take Wemby over Hakeem? I'm sure that most modern NBA fans would look at Wemby and say, look at his talent. Look what he could do. Look at the oohs and ahs. He's 7'12". His hands look like frying pans. Of course I'd take him over Hakeem. What would you do? Would you take Wemby if you were starting a team right now, or if you needed to win a series? Would you take Wemby over Hakeem? I don't know. I don't know. I'm really curious what people have to say when it comes to skills and how they relate to winning. Of course, I'm removing some of the context because circumstances matter as well. Take a player like Damian Lillard. I've heard people say, you take Damian Lillard and you put him in the 70s and they'll think he was a god. You take Damian Lillard and you put him in the 90s, he'd be right there with MJ. Those are speculations, right? Those are just guesses based on who you might like as a basketball player, or if you tend to side with the more modern basketball as being the superior form of the sport. Damian Lillard has never won an NBA championship. Damian Lillard's never won an MVP. Damian Lillard is a top 75 player. Would you take Damian Lillard over Jalen Brunson? For me, winning is very important. If you are the best player on a team and you lead your team to a championship, I think that weighs heavily on your career. I think that adds a lot to your career. Damian Lillard has unfortunately never really played with, let's say another star. They tried it in Milwaukee with Giannis, but injuries disrupted a lot of that. Game time, can't doubt his clutchness. He's had plenty of moments of clutch. Speaking of Paul George from earlier, Paul George is a first-hand witness of what Dame time can do to you. But at the end of the day, it wasn't good enough to lead his team to a championship or a deep playoff run. Damian Lillard is extremely skilled, one of the best shooters in the history of the NBA. For a player of his size, one of the best scorers in the NBA, in the history of the NBA. Would you take Damian Lillard over Allen Iverson? Allen Iverson at least led his team to a finals with a team that was worse than probably it was definitely probably worse than Damian Lillard's best team he was on. So in other words, he went farther with less. Allen Iverson's won MVP. He's won scoring titles as well. Smaller player than Damian Lillard. I don't know. These type of questions are what swim in my mind. You might think I'm bugging. You might think, hey, skills are important. You take players today; they're so skilled. They're so skilled. They're so skilled. But not all of them see success. They all can't see the same successes, obviously. But how much does is how important is that to you? If you're watching this, if you're listening to this, if you're a fan of the NBA, how important are skills to you? I'm really interested. I'm gonna try to see if I can put this question out there, get some responses from people, and maybe do a follow up at another time. But these are just some of the things I was thinking about. What a lot of teams are probably thinking about as they finalize their draft picks for tonight. Hoping to see maybe some moves that teams make. There are a lot of players who are on shaky grounds with their teams, and might be prime time to move them so that you can get some pieces and build for the future. And maybe some players will be given opportunities going to new teams to reach new heights with their skills and talents. We'll see. But anyway, if you stuck around for a little bit, I appreciate you. Slim is Semm. I'm gonna keep doing this every Tuesdays and Thursdays. Today wasn't much happening in the background, more me talking, but we'll find our niche. We'll find what we're gonna do soon. But I appreciate you for taking the time, and you have a wonderful evening. And hey, hope you enjoy the draft.